Whether you're a therapist, a healer, a guide, or someone walking your own path of transformation, this space is for you. Today's gathering is born from a deep desire to reconnect to what's truly important, not just for our clients, but also for ourselves. We'll be exploring how trust, presence, and shared vulnerability can shift the way we show up in our work and in our lives. Inner immersion is a modality that emerged not from theory, but from lived experience, from a near-death encounter that changed everything. It weaves together storytelling, guided imagery, expressive art, breathwork, and the courage to meet what's true. And I have the privilege and great joy to introduce two people who will guide us in this conversation today. Firstly, Wilke. Wilke Roig is a transpersonal psychologist, grief counselor, death doula, educator, and true leader in the field of integrative healing. She holds advanced degrees in both psychology and the arts, and her path has been shaped by cross-cultural study and decades of work at the thresholds of death and dying. Wilke serves as the Deputy Director of Education for the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross Foundation Global and is the president of the EKR chapter in Central Mexico. She is also an end-of-life doula, instructor, and council member with INALDA. And she is also the founder of the Latin American Network for Accompaniment in Grief and Dying. Today, Wilke is our host and moderator, and I know you'll feel the presence that she brings to this conversation. Jose is a near-death experience survivor, visionary artist, international speaker, and the co-founder of Inner Immersion. A former electrical engineer, Jose's life was forever changed in 2000 after a profound near-death experience and years of physical recovery. That experience opened a new path for him, one rooted in healing through art and presence. Jose began creating meditative art in 2004, and his work is now featured in hospitals and healing institutions across the US and Canada. He has stories highlighted in the Netflix docuseries Surviving Death, and he has personally guided over 2,000 participants through the inner immersion process and more than 200 licensed mental health professionals. Jose's heart and authentic humanity are the center of this method, and today you'll hear not only his story, but his experience. So with that, I invite you to take a deep breath, arrive fully and open to what's possible when we lead with trust, and Wilke, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for taking your time to be here with us today. And thank you, Anastasia, Jose, Victoria, Randy, for everything you've done to make this happen, not just this webinar, but everything that Inner Immersion is all about. I've been engaged with supporting Inner Immersion, which I experienced for the first time in a virtual space, much like this, in 2021. It was my first experience with the method, which I found to be very transformative online. And then I got the opportunity to have the experience in person and then to help support this space for facilitation with Jose and learning from him and the groups that we held space for. And so what I can tell you as a psychologist, but as a human being, I think more importantly, as a person who goes through losses and has had adverse experiences and who has navigated all of the systems and paths of healing, as a person who lives with grief and who is going to die, that this method was particularly outstanding in so many ways. And so it is, I find it to be unique, especially because there are so many things that it contains, holds, and offers from a place of humanity and of equality, human to human, sharing stories and experiencing together something in community, that it empowers each person who participates in the experience. And so, as Anastasia said, there are so many. The other thing about this transformative method is that it engages so many different approaches in one experience. that it is effective for the individuals, for the community, and for the facilitator. So it is a opportunity for healing and wholeness that is integral and depends on the community, right? So this is not about hierarchies. This is not about one person knowing and then telling others, but rather how do we share that experience that allows all of us to evolve, grow, and heal together. And so the method includes, as Anastasia said, storytelling, that way in which we can connect through lived experience. It includes creative expression. It includes very pointed, very interesting free association questions, creative expression, breath work, some meditation, and this way in which only in a circle can we put together a bigger picture and connect with a deeper wisdom in ourselves. And what I see, and just the how many years have I been involved with inner immersion? Maybe 3 or 4. Just in that small time, I have seen and witnessed the transformation in myself, as well as in those who participate. I've heard many inspiring testimonies about the palpable transformation that occurs. And we will talk more in detail about that so you can get a better sense of how this is possible, but it is possible. But Inner Immersion has been doing this work. Jose has been facilitating these spaces for, it's over 16 years now. Is that right? Yes.
Yeah.
And so the testimonies are so many. And so the other really beautiful aspect to this is not only that we see marked sustained transformation in the individuals that participate, but also we see a sustained transformation and a sense of fulfillment in the facilitators who have the opportunity to hold the space. So this is something that, as opposed to what we are used to if you're a clinical professional, that it's a very long-term, potentially sustained practice that maybe we can get deeper into, and that then of course there's so much demand and we're only one person, and then we have to fill a schedule, and then we're at the risk of burnout ourselves. This is an alternative to holding space in a different way that brings very palpable results, and that only requires checking in after the session maybe 1 or 2 times, and then there could be some kind of follow-up, but it's a very different engagement that feels very, I want to say, liberating. And so with that, I would like to introduce Jose, who not only is an amazing individual, but someone who, to me, emanates the fruits of this experience that came from his near-death experience, right? Which is a whole other dimension of this work that I find fascinating and powerful. Maybe you're familiar with near-death experience theories and literature, testimonies, and all of these things that are available to us. But there is something that near-death experiences in themselves offer humanity through an individual that comes back from them. And so I find that Jose is a living testimony of all of this. And with that, I will pass the mic to you, Jose.
Well, thank you. That's a beautiful way to hand the mic over. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Anastasia, for your kind of introduction. And I just want to share a little bit about the my NDE, so you get a sense of what that was like, and ultimately what became this program as a result of that NDE. So I'm just going to take you back with me a little bit. So we're going to go back a little bit in time, and I'm going to tell you where I was. I'm going to give you a real condensed version of it, because it usually takes an hour to share the story. And when we do the practice, we share the entire story, and we get a real connection with the people that are sitting in front of us, because a lot of it relates to their life. my experience of dying related to their life. And then the first question I ask is, what do you learn when you have this experience of dying? And that's what's going to be the start for this thing. So imagine I got hurt at work. They gave me some pain meds, and there was a medication in there that I was allergic to. Had an allergic reaction. I couldn't breathe. And I find myself 1 minute fine, the next minute I'm fighting for my life. I'm in a hospital emergency room, and they're performing CPR, and I am conscious or aware of what's going on, might be a better word. And I'm going through this process of thinking that death was a finality. I was very science-based. So to me, math and science were my God. I didn't believe in a God or a creator or anything like that. So I was very math-based and science-based. And in my mind, math and science are going to prove that there is no God eventually, and that everything is just a system, right? Everything follows A, B, C, D, an order. So I'm having this experience of dying, and with that in those thoughts in my mind, and being an engineer, my thought was going to be like, okay, I'm going to get turned off like a light bulb, and it's going to be nothing. I'm going to turn to nothing. I'm going to disappear. That thought made me incredibly fearful, and it made my dying very difficult. And so I go to get mental help, and in that process, I was really struggling, so I couldn't talk about what my problem was. And I had all these fears, and my fears were very simple. What are they going to say about me? What are they writing about me? How is that going to follow me in life? Am I going to be able to get a job? Am I going to be able to work? Are they going to say I'm insane? I was worried about a million things, so I couldn't talk. And I was ashamed to talk about it anyway. So I go to therapy for 5 years, every Tuesday at 10 o'clock, and I'm walking around in an oxygen tank. Like, I need the oxygen to breathe. And every Tuesday at 10 o'clock, I'm there. I don't say a word for half an hour at least. And then there's only at 10:55, your session is over. They got 5 minutes in between. And then I start talking about the weather. Now I'm living in Florida, so all of you could talk about how hot it is, how humid it is, sunny, it's rainy, it's whatever. And I didn't want to say anything about anything that mattered. And for 4 years, not one of these practitioners could get me to speak about why I was there. And the reason I couldn't speak was I couldn't trust them. In my mind, I couldn't trust them. And then one day, I'm going through my 5th therapist now. Woman looks at me, and I'll never forget her. I can't mention her name or anything, but I'll never forget her, because she changed my life. She looked at me and she said these words, "I'm not supposed to do what I'm going to do now." And she sat next to me and she took my hand. Sorry. The minute she took my hand, where was I? Back in the hospital bed. I was dying again. And she was holding my hand. So I wasn't alone. And I was able to share a story. It took an hour, but she heard my story. And the fact that she did that changed my life in a way that was unbelievable. I mean, it took 3 years to get off the drugs, but I got off. But the journey didn't end there. It's what she said to me at the end of that session changed my life. So she said this: you can believe that you're going to be shut off like a light bulb and everything turns to nothing and blackness. Or you can believe your father's going to come and get you. Which one do you want to believe? That was a no-brainer. She made me embrace the event. She made me integrate it into my life and own it.
that separation between me and the person I look to for guidance or to tell me and explain to me what's happening with me, that gap is so great that we cannot relate, and that it, in a way, continues to foster that disconnection, right? At the same time, the specialists, we are encouraged to disconnect from our nature and from our humanity in order to serve, and in order to know, in order to just prescribe and diagnose, right? Rather than connect with our own humanity and be able to connect through our humanity, right? So all of these things together are contributing to the state of affairs today, right? You know, there's so much that is kind of ambiguous about how do I become a whole, integrated, healthy person? And whether we are on the authority side or on the human side, you know, why are we on sides? So there's that. But that means that we are not handling change and transformation in life, transitions in life well, that we are going through losses and not able to grieve well, right? Grief, there's no room for that transition time that is necessary for healing and integration to occur. And that, you know, when we are on the side of the specialist, we need to more and more turn them over because there's so much need, because there's so much disconnection, right? Going back to as a facilitator, there's something that we don't speak about enough, because burnout isn't just from all of the service that we provide. It is not just about the caseload. It is not just about meeting certain requirements. It is also about holding back our humanity. It is also about staying disconnected from our own humanity in order to serve, in order to help others heal and integrate, right? So it's not just from what we do, it's also from what we withhold. And so in this space of inner immersion, which is kind of a re-empowering of the truth of the individual in the space of the truth of the community, there are so many different ways in which trust is built, because one of the things about the systems today is that we, you know, as in Jose's story, if we feel like what we need to share, what we have felt, what we have lived, what we have survived, could classify us within certain social categories that then make us be rejects or marginalized in some way, then there's another layer of disconnection. I cannot admit to myself the truth that I have survived because it puts me at a different level of risk, right? So there's so many different nuances that we could look at that are not serving us well, both, you know, as professionals or as the people who seek the help. But in the space of something like inner immersion, there is no authority. Nobody knows more than anyone. And what we are doing is encouraging the wisdom that comes from experience. That must begin with being able to recognize what that was, what is the context within which whatever happened, and to understand in that not being alone, that even when my story is different than somebody else's story, we're all navigating humanity together, right? And there's a way in which that terminal uniqueness, it's a terminology used in some circles, sort of dissipates, and then we are able to embrace the experience within a broader context. So it validates without having to validate literally to say, yes, I validate your experience, but rather there's a sense of validation, there's a sense of inclusion, that but possible shame is also dissipated in that space, because there is no labeling and there is no something is better, worse, you know, shameful or not. So there's a way in which that also supports that empowerment. There's also complete autonomy. Each individual goes as far as they're able. Each individual goes as deep as they want, and they gauge, you know, and it's not even that they consciously gauge. There is something that happens in that unconscious space because we're working with the unconscious, and through creativity, through breath work, through other safe ways of allowing what needs to come to conscious awareness now to come and not to overload. There's just something really fantastic that happens there, that it's gauged by the person's nervous system. And so they have the authority, they have the determination, and they get to observe whatever is ready to arise into their conscious awareness, whatever it is that they can deal with at that time. And because there is that sense of safety and trust, then we're surprised by all that can come through. So these core issues reveal themselves in ways that are accessible and not threatening to the person. So there's no authority that's telling them, apart from just offering these different exercises and things that we are sharing together in community, there's no, it needs to be this way, you need to think this way or feel this way, don't feel this way. So there is none of that is present in this space. And this power of the circle, right? This power of community that allows a person to feel safer, because even if they are not touching and even if they were not holding hands, there's a sense of I am together with others like me who are seeking something and who are getting something. And then in the sharing, everybody speaks of their own experience. Nobody is, cross-talking about other people's experiences. There's a way in which people have this space and the opportunity to have their own realizations and having their own insights.
So the process is engineered the same way I experienced it, so that I came into the space scared, afraid, not trusting anything, unsure of everything, questioning everything I had done in life, everything I had learned. And when I left, I felt complete. I felt whole. So it kind of dismantled me in a way and then put me back together. Put me back together, it created a sense of peace and tranquility. So I'm very calm, very peaceful about life. I look at it so different, I love life. And we love life. And hopefully that's what we impart. And when we work with people, anybody that becomes a facilitator, you're going to find that a lot of people are going to say to you, you gave me God back. You gave me a higher power. You gave me creator. You gave me out of their belief. They got something that they thought they lost back. And that begins that process of wholeness. Because once they could hold on to something, that gives them a future. Once there's a future, there's opportunity. Once there's opportunity, there's now I need to take action. What do I need to do to take advantage of this opportunity that's in front of me? And I've worked with people in addiction for a while now, and many have had 1 or 2 sessions, and in 1 or 2 sessions, they clean and sober. Their life has changed. It's mind-boggling. And the sense that you get as a facilitator, that fulfillment, like, yeah, I did it, it's so fulfilling. I mean, it's just mind-boggling. And I can imagine the mental health professionals that had worked with me for those 5 years, how maybe frustrated they might have been that they weren't making any progress, that there wasn't nothing going on. They couldn't say, oh, I made a change. I made a breakthrough. And, it's the breakthrough happens so quick here, usually in that first session, that it's kind of breathtaking in a way, but the way it makes you feel, it's just so uplifting, like, and it makes you feel whole. I think part of burnout in any field is your measure of success. And if you don't feel like you're making a difference and you're successful, it begins to become part of that burnout process. Like it begins to weigh you down. What am I doing? How come I can't get through? You begin to doubt yourself. And I think the way this process works, because it's so quick, it takes that out of the equation. And what you're looking at is, wow, I'm making a difference.
Yeah, and as I'm hearing you share all of that, there's a few things that come up in terms of, the function of transition in life and throughout life. Like I said, that we are missing out on because we're not given the permission or the time, and the way the rhythms of society just don't allow for that. But it makes me think of several things. how there was a time when, as a humanity, we used to connect with that which this inner immersion model brings to us, and that sensation of wholeness and that sensation of sort of belonging to something greater than ourselves is something that our sort of threshold ceremonies for, millennia served us as a humanity and as a species before we started to focus more on being an individual and, sort of whatever is dominating today. And so there's a beautiful return to that in the contemporary context.
Wilka, I want to thank you so much for moderating this conversation. To let everyone know, this is our first webinar. The purpose of these conversations is to begin to build a network of support for mental health professionals in the field. So this is not just for you to learn about inner immersion, but really to begin to have a dialogue around some of the challenges of being a mental health professional and to find supportive communities. So as you've registered in Zenler, we are building out a community where you can have discussion and continue the conversation. You'll be getting details about how to do that. You will be getting an email with a replay for the webinar and also information on how you can register for an inner immersion if you would like to experience this with Jose. Jose doesn't often do the immersions himself anymore, but if you register through the links that you will be getting in the follow-up email, he will be leading the actual immersions, one on Friday the 13th and one on Friday the 20th. So they're limited to 10 people per session. There is a certification program. You can look on our website and find out more about that. We will be having a next cohort in the fall, one in Arizona and here in British Columbia. And any questions, we just invite you to stay in communication with us. And again, thank you all for attending.